And thank you all for showing up. I was worried, this isn't the most exciting title, Cognitive Biases in Players and How to Leverage Them, but hopefully I can teach you a bit about what I've learned.
Interesting. How do I get an A? Will there be a test?
The test is life and your designs. So I'm Michael Keller. I am a twice published tabletop game designer. Mainly economic Euro games is what I specialize in. I'm running some of my games this convention and another panel, so feel free to look that up in the schedule if you find what I say interesting. My games are Captains of Industry and City Hall. Those are the ones I've published, and I've got a couple dozen more that will never see the light of day. That's life. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this quote from Sid Meier. Games are a series of interesting choices. Now, the problem is games aren't just choices, they're the people who are making them. Now, if everyone who ever played your game was a rational choice theory programmed robot who made the mathematically correct decision at every point, then yes, you could only focus on the choices you're giving people and not the people who are making them. But they're not that. People have their own biases, conscious and unconscious, that affect their decision making, when even if something might be mathematically the wrong move, they'll make it anyway because they can't see what's going on underneath. Their judgment is being clouded. So as a game designer, what you need to do is to be aware of these, to be aware of the ways of the things that influence how people think that you wouldn't think that way. Even if something can be mathematically proven to be a right decision, someone else might not make it, and you need to understand that. But the good news is you can also take advantage of that. You can use that to nudge people. So if you feel your game is perfectly balanced in every way, but there's this one place, there's this one point in the game where people are just making a crazy choice, you can take it, if you're aware of this, you can take advantage of this, set up conditions that won't actually affect the mathematical balance of your game, but will nudge players in the direction of behaviors you want to see more often and away from the ones you want to see less often. So yeah, as game designers, especially the types of games I design especially are relatively medium to heavyweight economic games. So I see games as this interlocking set of pieces, right? That all move in harmony, and if any one of them is just a little bit off, the whole thing grinds to a halt. But of course, the missing part of this is the player, who you thrust into your game and suddenly immediately realize, I'm subjecting them to something they don't want. So let's take a look at an example. These cards are from a game called Dixit, 2008, released by Jean-Louis Rubira. So this is a pretty simple party game, but for anyone who doesn't know, the idea is that the clue giver there's one of these cards that the clue giver has played, and they need to give a clue that will guide people towards their card to guess what their card is and away from the other ones. But they don't want everyone to guess that, because then the clue giver loses. So the clue giver has to get some, but not all of the people, to guess the right card. Now, if he gives too vague of a clue, well, this could be multiple of those cards. No one will get it. The clue giver gets no points. If it's too obvious of a clue, everyone gets it, and everyone gets points except the clue giver. So the clue giver has to find a way in the middle. They have to judge how other people are thinking. And this game only works if the clue giver can thread this needle. If the clue giver can't, if they're new to the game, if they don't understand this type of game, the game will break down very quickly, and everyone will come away thinking it's unplayable or too easy. So, this you have to take into account how players will view your mechanics and deal with that. Let's take a look at another example. So This is a scoring card from a game called Agricola. Just check. How many people have played Agricola? Okay, so the idea behind this game is that you're building a farm. And there are many parts to a farm: housing and fences and barns and animals and crops, right? And you get points in each category of things you have at the end of the game based on how many you have them. So you want to score in a bunch of categories because having 10 million grain doesn't get you that many points. So you need to balance this out. Now, for those who have played Agricola, does anyone notice anything wrong with this card? Okay, this is not the actual card from Agricola. This is. So you'll notice the difference is in the points you get. 0, I put 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, when in reality it's -1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, whether you play with either of these cards will not affect who wins the game. Mathematically, these cards are identical. So the question is, why did the designer decide that you start off with -1 point in each category instead of 0, and you go to +1 instead of going to +2? Why do that? And this is something called loss aversion. So he was trying to nudge people to not min-max in a couple categories. He wanted to nudge people to say, hey, I want you to build farms that have everything, even a little bit of everything, just one of everything at least. And so by starting it off at -1, players already think, oh, I don't want to lose points. That's going to be terrible. If I lose points in this category, I have to do something there. As opposed, even though, again, it makes no scoring difference whatsoever if you base it at 0. So this is a very clever thing. Now, of course, I haven't spoken with Mr. Rosenberg, who designed this game, but I'm pretty sure this is what's going on. And I just didn't want to give examples from my own games for the whole thing, because none of you have played it. So, so yeah, the designer took advantage of a cognitive bias in players, loss aversion, to shift their behavior without changing the balance of the game one bit. How many of you know what this is? Okay, so if you go to a casino and you see the roulette tables, you will sometimes see a sign here. This sign shows the recent history of what has been rolled on the roulette wheel. Now, of course, casinos would go out of business if the wheels weren't perfectly random. So this gives you nothing. In theory, this gives you no information whatsoever. But so why do they do that? Why do they waste the floor space? Why do they pay the money to put the thing up and maintain it? They're tricking you into thinking you have more information than you actually do. They're tricking you into being more confident, so you'll take bigger risks because you feel you have information that you actually do not. And this actually takes this actually deals with a couple of things. There's the gambler's fallacy, in which gamblers believe that even though these things are independent, they affect each other. So if someone thinks they have an edge, they'll be more risky, and it takes advantage of that. Alternatively, someone might see a bunch of red numbers in a row and say, okay, it's going to keep going red, whereas the person on the other side of the table thinks, oh, we're due for a black. Now these people have two completely opposite, and they're both wrong, but they both feel happy playing. They're more engaged. So without changing the balance of the roulette wheel, the casino is getting you to be more engaged, to play more, take bigger risks. They're changing your behavior. The anchoring effect. So this is from a prototype of mine that's now published, Captains of Industry. Now in this game, players are competing in different markets, producing different commodities and pricing them out. And players actually have to buy from each other. You're not just selling to the game, and you're not buying from the game. You're buying and selling to each other. And you can price it whatever you want. However, when you price when you buy something, you have to buy from whoever's selling the cheapest. So what other people price matters, because if they price cheaper than you, you can't use your own steel. You have to buy their steel first. So pricing matters. And at a playtesting convention like 8 years ago, I ran one session in the morning, and at the start, the first player who made the first set of goods, first turn of the game, priced their goods at 10. Now, I've given the players absolutely no guidance whatsoever on what prices should be, because the design of this game is that it can be anything. The market will decide. So the first player priced it at 10, and for the rest of the game, prices, I watched the prices, players stayed at 7, 10, occasionally 5, never below 5. In the afternoon, completely new set of people, also had never played the game before. First person priced it at 3, whole game, 0, 1, 3, maybe a couple 5s. There were 0 rule changes between these 2 sessions, 0 changes in rules explanation. It was just the first number that the first person saw, that the first person chose, everyone else tuned in on that and decided that must be the right number, even though they all knew, none of them knew how to play the game. So this is called the anchoring effect, where just implanting an idea of a number in someone's head will forever affect how they think the numbers that follow. So something you can think of doing here is, in your examples for rules explanations, be very careful of the numbers you choose when giving examples, because people will assume, I read that, therefore it means something, even if it doesn't. So, but you can also take advantage of this. If you think, I thought people were perpetually pricing things too low, right? If I thought people were perpetually pricing things too low, and it didn't give enough play in the markets, what could I have done? Well, I could have underlined the number 7. And people would have asked me, what does that mean? And I would have said, nothing. That underline doesn't mean a thing. But I guarantee you they all would have assumed 7 was the right price area, and they would have started there. Who's played Magic the Gathering? All right. More people than Agricola. Who would have guessed? So I won't go into it, but in Magic, let's break it down. There are 2 main categories of cards: land cards and non-land cards. Now, land cards are things you have to play to let you play the fun cards. And Richard Garfield has said that this is a weakness of the game. But there are some hidden advantages to this. This is a mechanic that lets people have a net positive reaction to the vagaries of luck in the game. How does it do this? Well, when someone wins, people always focus on when someone is victorious, successful, they always attribute everything to themselves. Oh, I did great. I won because of this. I was smart in these decisions. But if people lose, they will latch on to, with the strength of a bear, any reason to not blame themselves, to not feel bad about themselves. So so normally, if Monastery didn't exist, right? If you won, you'd feel confident. If you lost, you feel bad. And this, if anyone plays chess, right? If you lose, there's no one to blame but yourself. You suck. But with Monoscrew, it's no longer balanced 1 winner and 1 loser. Now there's another column where there's a winner and a not loser. Someone who doesn't feel bad about having lost, even though the other person feels great about having won. So you want to give players a way to not blame themselves, to not feel bad, because this will help them get past the loss and focus on eventual wins. And it means instead of playing it once, losing, and they're done, it means they'll come back for a second game and maybe this time they'll win. So what does this have to do with game design? Well, it's that it represents the fact that I couldn't find an informative graphic to go with the framing effect. The framing effect is related to endowment effect and loss aversion that we've talked about. Framing effect was, the initial number that everyone saw and then everyone homed in on. This is about if you frame the same odds in a probabilistic event in different ways without changing the odds, players will respond to that framing differently. So Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, okay, someone here has read this, Gave people a choice of treatments for a hypothetical fatal illness. Both choices had the same actual percentage chance for individual survival. However, when they said that the treatment A, 200 out of 600 people would live, 72% chose treatment A. Out of those who are told that 400 of 600 people would die, which is the same thing, that number dropped from 72% to 22%. Same odds, but you frame it positively versus negatively affects player choice. And so how can you use that? You can use this in games. So for instance, if an action required rolling a six-sided die with a positive result on a 6, there are 2 ways to frame this. You can say, hey, if you take this action, roll a die. On a 6, you succeed. That's great. And people are thinking, your players are thinking about the success. And they're saying, yeah, it's only 1 in 6, but I want that success. If instead you tell them, roll a die, 1 to 5, you fail. They're immediately thinking about failure. And they're focusing in on that, and they're going to do it less often. So you need to think about how you frame choices to your players, because that will affect how they respond to those. So this is from a book called Predictably Irrational, which I can't recommend highly enough. So this is an example given in the book where the economist gave people 3 choices for a subscription. An online-only subscription for $59, a print-only subscription for $125, or a print and online subscription for $125. The same cost as the regular print gets you print and online. Why would they do this? This is something they're taking advantage of called the decoy effect. Now, if they only presented offline, online only or online and print, okay, $59 or $125. I don't know. Is it, the people are doing the math in their head. Okay, is it 65? Carry the 1. Is it worth the price difference? It's hard for them to tell. But the decoy effect, the economists inserted a decoy option, the print subscription, which only it is not, and here's the important part, it's not only a bad choice because it is strictly worse than print and web, right? Same price, print and web gets you more. It is similar enough to print and web that it's an obvious choice. And so people no longer thought about online only versus print and web. They thought about print versus print and web. And oh, that's an obvious choice. I get something extra for free. You're using a decoy. This is the decoy effect. And something important to do when you're taking advantage of the decoy effect, it has to be super obvious and super close and easy to compare. You want to make a comparison that players don't have to really think about. If the print only price was $120 instead of $125, it wouldn't have been nearly as valuable, because then people have had to take the extra step of thinking, okay, is adding online when I have print worth $5? No, they just wanted people to say, oh, there's a bargain, of course I'll take it. That's the decoy effect. So let's go back to Agricola, which, when I presented this at Gen Con, everyone had played Agricola. Not a great choice for examples here. So here are a couple of cards in Agricola, things you can build, add to your farm. And they have various effects. This one costs 2 brick, this one costs 4 brick, but it has a better effect. Are these good choices? Who knows, right? If this is the first time you're playing Agricola, is it worth 2 brick for me to do this, to spend the action and the resources to gather that to build the fireplace? I have no idea. So what does Agricola do? There are 2 copies of each card, and the second copy costs 1 more of each. Now it's like, oh yeah, I need to get that fireplace because if I don't, it'll be gone and there'll be a worse one there. Never thinking, well, maybe I didn't want a fireplace at all. No, I have to get it before I lose the opportunity. By using these decoys. And the best part about this is, once someone has fallen for the decoy trap and bought the first fireplace, now the other people aren't thinking about, oh, I have to spend an extra, I got the worst one. They're thinking, oh, that person bought a fireplace, he knows something I don't, I got to get one as well. So either way, you can encourage your players to make a particular choice using this. So a while back, I play tested a game that's actually out now by Travis Chance called Infamy. It's a game themed around organized crime. And what's important to this example is there was a point where two people could conflict over, if one person took a board space, an opportunity, someone else could nudge them out by going into that same space and spending 1 ammo. However, the person who was being nudged out could respond by spending an ammo to cancel it. Now, these spaces were worth more than 1 ammo. So at any given point, the person whose decision it was, if I want to kick you out, it's going to cost me 1 ammo, but those spaces are worth more than 1 ammo, so of course I'm going to do it. And then to you, to get back in, it only costs 1 ammo to get back in. And it's worth more than 1 ammo, so of course you're going to do it. Plus you're kind of mad at me, so you want to stick it back to me. And in the end, the players go back and forth. In the playtest, the players went back and forth. They spent like 3 times as much as the space was actually worth, but they did it in increments. And this is called the escalation effect, where people will just, once they're committed a little bit, they're just going to keep going and going, nickel and diming themselves well past. There was, I don't think it's open anymore. There was actually an online auction site, like Penny Auction or something like that did this same nonsense, where you bid increments would cost you a penny, but you can only go 1 penny above. But every bid itself only cost you a penny to do. So altogether, all the people were spending hundreds and thousands of dollars for a $50 camera by using this escalation effect, by getting people to commit in small bits instead of having to go all in at once on the price. So that's something you can do. Give players, if people aren't built, say you have a large end game goal, like a monument that is supposed to be the capstone a player builds at the end of the game, but people aren't going after that enough. Give them the ability to contribute in regular intervals in small bits. And the very first time they do it, well, it's only $1, I might as well. The moment they do that, it's locked in their mind because they already spent $1, they might as well keep going. That's the escalation effect. Okay, let's talk about, so let's say you have a game, a game where the world is has 2 possible threats. It can be everyone killed in a Sharknado attack, or the planet itself can spontaneously implode. These are independent events that have these are completely independent events. There's a 40% chance a Sharknado comes about, 89% chance the planet just collapses into a black hole. However, you give your players a choice of 2 amulets. They only get 1. They can either get an amulet that negates Sharknado attacks or an amulet that partially negates the chance of the Earth imploding. Now, if you look at this, and if you give players this choice, okay, well, let's find out. Who would choose? So if you have the Sharknado amulet, the chance of it happening goes from 40 all the way to 0. It absolutely will not happen. If you get the implosion amulet, the chance only reduces from 89% chance to 75% chance that the Earth is destroyed. So let's see where the room is. Who would choose the Sharknado amulet? Okay. Who would choose the implosion amulet? My kind of crowd. Good job. Now, most people, though, if you show them this, they're going to lock in on that 0 number. People love the number 0. 0 is the difference between 0 and 0.1 might as well be a million. When they see, oh, I completely eradicate that, they're going to lock onto that. But of course, what happens when we look at what might happen? So if you bought the Sharknado amulet, the chance of both Sharknado and implosion happening is 0%, because Sharknado has 0%, implosion stays at 89%, you only have an 11% chance to survive. If you bought the implosion amulet, both happening 30%, Sharknado, sorry, that should be 40%. Did I type that wrong?
Yeah, it would be 40%. You got that implosion.
Oh, yeah, because it's in both. Yeah. Of only Sharknado is 10%, only implosion is 45%, and you survive 15% of the time. So even though people will lock in on, look, I can reduce one of these things to 0, and the other one I'm only reducing a little bit, only a tiny bit, that's nothing, 89 to 70. If your doctor said, you have an 89% chance of survival, but there's this drug, it'll make you go bankrupt, but it'll increase your chance of survival to 25%. It's like, thanks, doc. You really helped me out here. And yet, mathematically, it turns out to be the right one. So, be aware of this, because if you ever have a number that's close to 0, maybe think about making it 0. It won't affect the balance of your game that much, but if you want people to take that option, they love the number 0. Denomination effect. Okay, so people are less likely, and this is insane, people are less likely to spend big bills. When you tell your players how to set up the game, they get $20 to set up. If you want them to spend their money early, give them small bills. If you want them to hold on to their money to later, give them big bills. Even though it's the same amount of money, I guarantee you, they will, even if it's $1, they're like, oh, I have to trade in my 10, am I really going to, this is half of my thing, whereas if it's $1, well, I have a fistful of ones. Duh, who cares? I don't need this. This is garbage money. Hyperbolic discounting. So, this is actually a relative problem in society. People put too little emphasis on the long term, too much emphasis on the short term. They will, if you give them choices, they will forego a massive long-term gain for a minor short-term gain. And it's just how people act. So if you're trying to get people to go for a different option, right, and they're not doing it, now this isn't a pure bias because you actually have to change something in your game, but if you make it a little less good, but a tiny bit cheaper, they'll latch onto it and they'll go for it more often. And that's something you can take advantage of. Okay. So here's a little 3-act play. I'm sure you can guess what happened to me here. Who here has played Mario Kart? Fantastic. So, you know that when you get hit in Mario Kart, at least in many of the versions, you collect coins, and coins increase your engine speed. So you want to collect coins, but when you take a hit, you lose some coins. And this does something very interesting. So let's pretend this is a top-down view. Amazing graphics, I know. Go Nintendo. The coins, if you lose 3 coins, and the coins spread out around you in a triangle. Now, it's kind of a random arrangement, but they're in a triangle. They don't cluster. And the way it almost always turns out is that you can, now that you're at a dead stop, to continue, you can grab one of the coins on your way to gaining up speed again. Getting 2 of them or 3 of them, basically not going to happen. So you're guaranteed to get one of the 3 coins back. So what's the point of dropping 3 coins? Why not just drop 2 coins behind you and not make you drop 3 coins in the first place? So this is what I think is going on here is a trick that I call false recovery. You can make people think, if people are reacting too negatively to a downturn, to a loss, to bad fortune in your game when something happens, you can make them feel less bad by increasing the pain, but then immediately giving some of them right back. And it's magical. There's also, now maybe Mario Kart, that's debatable, but this game, Clash of Clans, absolutely does it. Anyone here play it? Okay, this is one of those online grind games. And in it, you're building a fort and you're collecting resources, and players can attack each other. And when someone attacks you, they take your resources out of your bank account. Now, the game already caps it at a percentage of what they can take. So even if they completely destroy you, they can only take like 20% of what you've collected, right? But the game designers were finding people were just responding too negatively to that. So what they did was they increased the amount that people could take from you, but then like the moment you logged in to see someone took it away from you, oh, there was a little gift box saying, oh, here's a refund of some of the loot that was stolen from you. literally none of the numbers changed because there was no skill involved in collecting that loot back. There was no choice involved. It was just there. You just got it back. So there's no difference between losing 20% or losing 21% but getting 1% back, and yet players respond more favorably because no longer are they focused on the loss. It's like, okay, I got a little bit back. A little bit. It's not great, but I got something back. You know, if a mugger takes your wallet, that sucks. But if he takes your wallet and your watch, and they said, you know what, here, you can have your watch back. You're going to be thinking about, oh my God, I got to keep my watch. So I ran a poll among my social media contacts before this. So the question was, I split people up based on what month they were born in into people who had a PAX badge, but their friend offered to buy it from them, or they missed out on getting a PAX badge, but their friend offered to sell it to them. And how much would you charge to get to give it to your friend? How much would you be willing to pay to get one? And this is fascinating. So if you didn't have it and you were willing, so this first set, these first 6 columns are people who did not have it, did not get a PAX badge. The question is, how much would they be willing to offer their friend to buy it from them? Now, some people just don't care about going to PAX, so okay. Some people, yeah, will go, but they also don't really care. But this follows a normal distribution of interest. This accurately reflects people's interest in going to the convention. And people and most people say, okay, I'll give my friend a little bit of a premium to get their badge. I understand that they need it, but some people say, no, I'll only pay face value because that's just how they felt. But it's a standard distribution. Now, if you have a PAX badge and someone wants to buy it from you, how much would you charge them? How many people said for no amount of money? And there's no amount of money. $1 million wouldn't have them give up their sold out PAX badge, which is insane because they weren't willing to spend $1 million to get one, but they're willing to forego $1 million to keep one. This is the endowment effect. People care more about something they have than something they don't. Even if it's the flip side of the mirror and you account for income effect, wealth effect, all those things, people are attached to the things they have. Why wouldn't someone just say, give me a, PAX badge costs $200, give me $1,000, right? But they wouldn't spend $1,000 to do it. And also, here's another thing, this also isn't a bell curve, right? You would expect it was like this, but people really hold on to attachment to it. It would start up here and just go straight slope down. But that's not what's happening. Almost no one said face value. If you have it, if your friend has it, you think it's fair for you to give them face value for the badge. If you have it, no way am I letting you have it for face value. What kind of friend are you? Open up your wallet, fool. I want more than that. So this is something to think about, that what people have versus what they want to get, and how you can frame things in terms of, saying say 7 wonders, right? You are given a wonder, but you have to pay for it, as opposed to there just being a wonder out there that you then have to go get. The fact that you're saying this is your wonder, this is yours, you just have to spend to get it. People latch on, oh, that's mine, I don't want to give that up. So the endowment effect. People care more about what they have, what they already have. Now, let's talk about taking advantage of these cognitive biases. This is not something you should start designing a game around. You should not set out with the idea of, look at all the crazy ways I'm going to trick people into doing dumb things. Right? You're not the adversary to your players. You're their partner in generating a fun experience for them. So what you need to do this is not your starting point. This is I've been developing this for 3 years and people are still doing this crazy thing. How can I get them to stop doing this crazy thing? Well, I could give them more to not do it, but then that destroys the whole balance of the game. No, that's when you step in and you say, okay, I'm certain the balance is right, which it never is, no matter how much you think it is. Let me just nudge people. I don't want to change the game, I just want to change their behavior. And that's when you look back and say, okay, what are these psychological tricks I can use, especially effective on first-time players? And guess what? If a first-time player doesn't have fun, they're never going to be a second-time player. So how can I take first-time players and nudge them in interesting and fun directions where they won't have a terrible experience just because they didn't understand the game and they didn't want to sit there doing calculus work while people waited for them to take their turn? Any questions? No? Okay. Oh, yes.
I did raise my hand initially because it was more of a joke question. So you established that you shouldn't make a game based on cognitive biases, but could.
I guess the game Mind Trap would basically be a giant game of a box of cognitive biases.
All right.
Okay, things you can. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I want to ask, I remember you were talking about the selling of the magazine scenario where it's got, would someone ever consider overcharging for the per prep one? Like, let's say instead of 125, 125, 130, 125, or is that just too obvious and insulting?
I mean, I've seen online web stores do this. Like, obviously, make obvious bad, side by side. Oh, this is an obvious choice because this costs even more per ounce. The danger in that is it's another mental block for someone to recognize the different price and, say, okay, how much is this difference worth, right? The nice thing about having it be the same price is you're greasing the skids, right? The point is players, especially of a new game, there's so much they're needing to learn and make decisions about that if you make a really easy decision, they're going to take that easy decision just because it's easy to take, right? And so having the exact same price instead of inverted prices, it just greases the mental skids a little more. Yes?
Do you have any thoughts on including or balancing RNG for certain games? You get a game like Hearthstone, which has a lot of RNG in it, and that hardcore players are somewhat upset about that. But then you get a lot more people that are more general players that are, like you said with that cognitive bias about, oh, I'm not losing because I'm bad at the game, I'm losing because I got a bad dice roll.
Yeah, there is a reason. I'm someone who prefers, the very mathematical, economic games about value. If you see me pick up some dice, it's probably because someone else dropped it and I want to hand it back to them. But I'm in the minority. Most people, they like, not just, it's not just that randomness helps them not feel bad about losing chess for the 10th time in a row because they're just not good and they give up on the game. Randomness gives them a chance to win, but also some people just genuinely enjoy that thrill. That's separate from a cognitive bias in terms of by introducing randomness, you are actually changing the game. But the important thing to think of in that example is you're giving people something to give them a reason to latch on to. Something obvious and visible, right? That, okay, if you have randomness in your game, make it obvious when it's randomness that screwed the person, as opposed to them feeling bad. They don't realize it was randomness that put them in a bad position. They just feel bad about playing the game. Yes?
In all your time designing games and seeing what other people do and such like that, which of the biases do you feel is the most powerful? Whatever it's put into a game, it has
Endowment Effect.
Endowment?
By far. This morning, I playtested my new design with someone, and she in the game, you're setting up trade routes, and my idea was, okay, we'll start off players with no money, and they have to take out loans, and they use that loan money to establish trade routes and profits and build up, and towards the end of the game, they pay off the loans, right? Because they're using that money, they're reinvesting it, and it's easy to make more money. But this playtester just immediately paid back the loan with the first with the proceeds from the first trade and then had no money and then was like, oh, I have to take out another loan. And it's because when people feel they're losing something in terms of paying interest,
Yeah.
they hate that. They hate giving up what they have. She was thinking more about the interest she'd be giving up than the profits she'd be making from holding on to that loan money. So absolutely, endowment effect, people hate giving up what they have, and they'll fight tooth and nail not to do it. So that's the strongest one. Yes?
Are there, I don't know how to phrase it properly, are there ways to encourage players to perform certain behaviors without specifically money? Like, I don't know, it's like, I'm more interested in RPGs than, like, D&D style RPGs.
Right.
I guess. And I'm just really curious if there's ways to affect behavior without specific payout benefits, but with benefits nonetheless.
I think going back to the framing effect is probably the best way to do that. In terms of you're still even without money, you're giving your players decisions that have costs, benefits, risks. Frame it in terms of the benefits, and they'll take the opportunity more often. Frame it in terms of the risks, they'll avoid the opportunity more often. Yes.
You also mentioned about the game designer trying to make the balance right, where you mentioned RNG or trying to make it more of an encouraging experience. Can it also be the player's fault for why someone might hate the game, like if they're playing mind game with them and like in a fighting game or something, or is just the player taking advantage of how the game work as opposed to less experienced player?
I'm going to dodge that question by saying, if you as a game designer are ever blaming your players, you're wrong. Even when you're right, you're wrong. Don't ever go into thinking of that, because guess what? That person's not going to buy your game, and everyone they talk to about your game is never even going to play it. And it doesn't matter that you blame them for being wrong. It's your job to get them to have fun with your game. Yes?
Another question, which I'm not entirely sure is exactly the point of what you're talking about, but like when designing classes, how do you make it viable for somebody to choose any of the classes versus some are more interesting than others? I don't know if that's something that you would know.
I mean, in terms of viability, when you say viability, now you're talking about game balance, and that's beyond the scope of this. And also, I'm not in. No, it's okay. I'm also not an RPG designer.
Yeah, I kind of. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But in terms of, in terms of viability, that's on you to figure out if a choice is viable. But in terms of nudging people to choose a choice that you think is viable, but they aren't taking anyway, that's when you use these cognitive biases to nudge them. And one way you can do it, if you feel a class is getting underpicked, what you can do is talk about them in terms of positives only, and talk about the other classes in terms of their negative values more often, even without changing what those values are. Just talk about positive versus negative. People will gravitate towards the positive.
It's like when for example, if all choices had equally beneficial outcomes, but somehow one was considered less fun or less interesting.
Talk it up.
Okay.
Use flowery language. It's an RPG. You're allowed to do that. Yes, sir.
So, do you ever hit a point with using these cognitive biases to influence behavior? Or if you lean too heavily on it, a player is going to start seeing the strings.
Oh, yeah.
Manipulated.
Yeah, using cognitive biases is most powerful on first-time players, and usually that's who you have to deal with.
Because somebody's listening all the time, so I'll pick them on those things and they'll be like,
Right. Again, cognitive biases are what you use at the end of your design, not at the start.
Okay.
It's after you're certain, and you shouldn't be certain, but you will be, even though you shouldn't be, certain that the balance is right. Is it mass exodus? I don't know.
So when you talk about nudging players in the direction of certain choices, what sort of choices are you intending to nudge them in the direction of? I know talked about making cards which seem good, which are also bad, and adding depth to the game that way. But what sorts of
No, this isn't about that, because that's talking about game balance. These cognitive biases shouldn't be used for game balance. They're used when the game is balanced, but you feel players are undervaluing an option and never exploring it and never learning that it is viable. And the fact that no one goes there then hurts the rest of the game, because players are supposed to go in different directions, and that's where the interesting bit comes in. If you need to get some people to try that direction, but you can't change the balance, that's when these come in.
So what if you want to make something more valuable, more people choose it, but you want to but you don't want like everyone to then go to that one? How do you deal with balancing that?
You nudge it. I mean, if it's balanced, right? Like the question is, are too few people or too many? If too many people are going for it, you can use things like the framing to talk about, present it in the negative to players before the positive. List the bad effects before the positive, and that'll push people away from that decision. Yes?
I actually wanted to pull up this from the issue of the resources. I wanted to see the author does look at picture. What's the last slide in resources?
Isn't the predictably irrational?
Yeah.
Oh, Dan O'Reilly. Predictably Irrational by Dan O'Reilly. These are some other books that I also...
Could you leave that up for a second?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
These are other resources that are great for thinking about these things. Like I said, my name is Michael Keller. I'll go back to this in a second, but just want to point out those are my 2 published games so far. I will be running sessions of it at the convention if you want to come try them out. And here are some ways to reach me, and I have some business cards up here. Yes, there was a...
Yeah, so naturally, one of the challenges you mentioned is grouping the players and keeping the players. Just from your experience, since you do a lot of player testing and you make a lot of changes to the game based on those responses, do you find that if you found someone who's really turned off to something, you find it very difficult to capture them back?
Oh, it's too late.
Yeah, it's too late by then?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first impressions matter. There are so many games out there. There are more games than anyone who wanted to could ever play. They're not going to give you a second chance. So that's why this is an important tool. You can't rely on them playing your game 10 times before they realize it's actually balanced.
Right.
They need to feel it's interesting and diverse the first time they play it. Here's my schedule for the rest of the convention. I'm giving another panel. How do you develop a board game? That's more about process than a specific technique, just overall process. So you might want to check that out. All right, thank you.